enough, nobody's going to pay her money to take her clothes off. Everyone's going to be like, dude, no one wants to see that anymore. That was a long time ago, right? Sports Illustrated swimsuit models, sooner or later, will get so butt ugly, no one will want to see her anymore. That's what we know about this first box. It all goes away. But even though the Victoria's Secret model will get old and sag and bag, there will be another Victoria's Secret model who will come along. In other words, even though the physical body gets old, there's this concept, and that you might put that word, concept, above the second box. There's this concept called beauty, right? And there will be another Victoria's Secret model that will come along, but we will still have this concept of beauty. Now, where is beauty? Victoria's Secret models we can touch. Well, if I suppose we're lucky, right? But can you touch beauty? No. See, how do you do? Well, no. Why? Victoria's Secret models are physical. Beauty is a concept which is metaphysical. Now that term meta means beyond. Do you got me? Beyond the physical. Okay? Now, many years ago, my dear friend and the janitor of our school, Ruthie, planted a tree out in that courtyard for me so that I could make this observation. And so I call it Ruthie's tree. Follow this. Ruthie's tree, as referenced by simply RT in the first box, watch this. You can go up and you can touch it, all the five senses. Smell it, taste it, right? All the five senses to Ruthie's tree, correct? But there's this other thing that we will call nature, right? So for example, how come Ruthie's tree knew how to grow to look like that instead of a Christmas tree? How did it know that? How did it know to grow to look like that and not like a Christmas tree? See? That's a really intriguing question, huh? Well, someone might say, if you ask a question like that, you kind of don't completely understand this thing of nature. Another word for nature we might say is energy, correct? Right? But can you touch energy? See how this... Sometimes, for example, I could keep playing this game for a long time. For example, by our age, we understand as we talk to our children, don't we? Watch the whiteboard, watch this. There's a huge difference between the exchange of fluids in sex and this thing we call love. Would you agree?
Really?
Huge difference, isn't there? Right? Now, I can tell freshmen in high school this and they laugh at me because in their stupid kid world, right, they're the same thing. But by our age, we realize not even kind of close to the same thing, right? Okay? Notice this related to the five senses, right? Exchange of fluids, sex. But what about love? Can you touch? Yeah, see, it doesn't work the same way. Do you understand? Love is metaphysical. Do you got me? Now I'll come back to John Donne. We call John Donne a very famous metaphysical poet. What does that mean? Well, it means that he's more interested in the stuff in this box than he is the stuff in the first box. Do you got me? He's more interested in this kind of stuff. But here's the problem. You can't touch beauty. So how are you going to write a poem about it? You can't touch love. So how are you going to write a poem about it? Well, what he will do is use stuff from the first box, right? But he will be very interested in more particularly the stuff of the second box. Make sense? All right? So let's take a look now at the poem, and I'll show you how this game gets played out. By the way, if you understand this concept, this poem starts to make a lot of sense really quickly. Why? Well, let's begin with the title. A valediction means a speech. So for example, you can be valedictorian of a class, and that means you get to give a speech, okay? So valediction will mean a special kind of speech, okay? A title, a speech. Notice the colon, and then forbidding mourning. Forbidding means what? You don't allow. What about this word mourning? Is this like, oh, good morning? No, this is a different word. What is this mourning? Sad. Being sad. So notice the poem begins with a title that says, I'm going to tell you why I forbid you to be sad. Now, the next thing I need to tell you that makes a lot of sense is that this is a poem written by him to his wife, a woman he was deeply in love with, and he was leaving on a long trip. Right? He was leaving on a long trip, and she was very sad. So he's going to write a poem where he ostensibly says to her, I'm going away, but I don't want you to be sad. Now, notice the form of this poem. It's constructed in multiple stanzas of how many lines each?
4.
Got it? As virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go. You can see it's iambic, but we're not playing pentameter game, are we? See how that works? Notice your rhyme scheme. Away rhymes with say. Go rhymes with no. What are we going to call it? A, B, A, B. See how that works? Okay. So Donne is playing games with form, but now let's stick with trying to understand what it is that he's telling her about not being sad. And he begins right away at 2B with a comparison using like or as. What do we call that? In figurative language, what's that called? When you compare two things using like or as? It starts with an S, and it looks like the word smile, but it's not the word smile. A simile. Very good. This is a simile. So we're going to have a comparison right away. Notice what he says. As virtuous men, virtue, good or bad? If you are a virtuous person, are you a good or a bad person? You're a good person. As virtuous men pass mildly away. Now, the word pass away, are you familiar with that term? If someone passes away, what does that mean? They die. If you are passing mildly away, that means you're lying in bed and soon will die, and people would sit around the bed and all your friends are there, right? And there would be somebody checking the pulse, correct? Notice the simile. As virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, they're ready to go because they're a good person. They don't have to worry about dying. While some of their sad friends do say, the breath goes now, and some say no. In other words, their pals, right, are sitting around the bed. Are they dead? No, they're not. Are they dead yet? Right? They're worried. So they're worried about the guy leaving, dying. But he's virtuous, and so he's not worrying about dying. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's all right. So, let us melt and make no noise, no tear floods, nor sigh tempests move. Uh-oh, what's he say? Let's not what? Let's not blow snot. We don't need to stand at the airport and blow snot at each other to show everyone how in love we are. Why? He uses another interesting comparison. He says, 'twere profanation of our joys. To be profane means that you're good or bad. Profane. If you profane something, are you good or bad? Profane means bad. So to say it's profanation means it's kind of bad, of our joys. To tell the laity our love. Now this is an interesting word picture. He says it this way. In church, there's two groups. There's the priests, right, who get up in front of everybody, and then there's the laity, the people who come and sit in the church pews. He imagines he and his wife like the priests, and the rest of the church, the laity. He says, we don't need to blow snot at the airport to show that we're sad about leaving, because the only reason we'd be blowing snot is to make a show for other people. But they don't understand our love anyway, so blowing snot at the airport would mean nothing to them. It would be a profanation of our love. It would be somehow demeaning our love to show this level of snot blowing at the airport. In other words, I gotta go away, but let's not blow snot about it. Because in the same way that a good man is ready to die, even though his friends don't want him to leave, I can leave you, and we don't need to blow snot and be all sad about it. He will say later in the poem, there's a reason for that, because we have a different kind of love. And that's going to be the essence of this poem, okay? In other words, don't be sad or don't mourn, because we have a different kind of relationship or love. Again, like I said, some people will say about this poem that it's the greatest single love poem of all time. Once you understand what's being said, let's go to the third stanza. Moving of the earth brings harms and fears. What do you imagine that means, moving of the earth? What would that even mean? When does the earth move? In what kind of natural catastrophes does the earth move? Earthquakes. Very good. Moving of the earth brings harms and fears. Men reckon what it did and meant. In other words, people don't understand why the earth starts moving and shaking, but it totally freaks them out. In other words, the stuff we don't understand oftentimes scares us because we don't understand it, correct? But trepidation, fear of the spheres, though greater far, is innocent. In other words, there's no reason to be afraid just because you don't understand. Just because you don't understand doesn't mean that you have to be afraid. He then talks about, and we're back to our little word picture on the board with our two boxes, dull, sublunary lovers' love. Dull, bright or not bright? Dull. If something is dull, bright or not bright?
It's not.
Not bright. Dull, sublunary lovers' love. Look at the parentheses. Whose soul is sense. Now, I didn't do this, but I could have on this whiteboard and because I knew I was coming to this point. For example, watch this. Where would we put Lorena in these two boxes? Now, this is a very difficult question. Where would we put Lorena? Well, watch this. We've got to put Lorena right here. Because, why? We can see, touch, taste. We won't get any further. Right? We would call this, though, Lorena's body. Now, imagine for a moment I'm giving this lecture, and all of a sudden I crank over dead. Which I suppose is a good way to go, right? That would be a good way to go, right? I'm giving a lecture on this, and all of a sudden, wham, there I go. I'm on the floor dead. And all of a sudden, Ms. Trimbath says about me, oh, the old man is gone. I'm dead, right? This is how we talk, isn't it? Uh-oh, old man McGee is gone, right? But what if my body, my corpse, could actually talk? Freak Lorraine out, I know. But what if my body were to say out loud, dude, I'm not gone. Everything about me that was here before is still here.
That'd be cool, honestly.
But it would be true, right? Yeah. If right now I were to crank over dead,
your body's still going to be with us.
Everything's here. The same muscles, the same body, the same fluids, everything about me that's right here. Correct? Everything about me would still be here. And yet, you say, uh-oh, McGee is gone.
So then you go to your...
What is gone?
It's just your body.
My body's still here.
Or, no, your mind, excuse me.
Ah, so see, watch what we would say about Lorena. There is two Lorenas.
I always knew that.
There we go. Put out the news flash. There is Lorena's body, but there's something else that we also call Lorena, or we wouldn't say Mickey is gone. Right? Correct? Yeah, we call this sometimes soul. Sometimes we call this spirit. By the way, sometimes we just call it life force or energy. All means the same thing, but where is it? How do you touch it? Now, notice something. Dunn's going to point out something about lovers. There are two kinds of lovers. There are lovers that are dull. They're not bright. Because their soul is sense. All they care about is the body. They love the body. They do not even understand the concept of the mind or the soul or the spirit. Got me? Now watch what he says about this, and this is fascinating. Dull, sublunary lovers love, parentheses, whose soul is sense, cannot admit absence, because it doth remove those things which elemented it. Watch my whiteboard, and this makes total sense. He says, people who are totally in love with the body, once those bodies are separated, they have nothing to love. Which is why they have to hold on to the body so much. No, you can't go, you can't go. Because once you're gone, what's there to love? The only thing they love is the body. They love what they can see, they love what they can taste, they love what they can touch, etc. In other words, the only thing they understand is the union of bodies. And because that's the case, they cannot admit absence. Because absence reminds them they don't have anything else other than their love of the body. Their love of the body is what made it, their love, elemented it, put it together. So obviously they can't tolerate being separated physically from each other because their bodies are what they love. Right? But now notice, those people are, for done, dull. They're not bright. They're not very bright. They're dull. Go back and look at it again. Dull, sublunary lovers love, whose soul is sense, cannot admit absence, because it doth remove the things which elemented it. But we, he's talking to his girl, we by a love so much refined that ourselves know not what it is, enter assuaged, that means brought together, enter assuaged of the, here it is. Remember? We said there's two Lorenas. There's Lorena's body, but there's Lorena's mind. He says, we love each other's minds, not bodies. Care less, what?
But the body, the eyes, lips, and hands.
None of that's there, and still we can still love each other. Why? Because we're not like normal people who just love the body, who fall in love with the body. If all you love is the body, when the two people are gone, of course you're going to be like really upset about it, because the only thing you love is the body. But if you love the mind, you can't touch the mind. Being separated is okay, because it's not like you're touching the mind when you are with the person anyway. He says, we love each other's minds or souls, and therefore being apart, it's no big deal, because we don't love each other's bodies anyway. Our two souls, therefore, which are one, and now he uses a really interesting word picture. And once you know this word picture, metaphor, it makes all the sense in the world. Our two souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not a breach or a break, but an expansion like gold to airy thinness be. Another comparison using like or as. We call that a what? A simile. Gold. If this is gold right here, right? I can make it a wad like that, or I can heat it up, refine it. If I heat up gold, it turns into liquid form, and then it lays out like this. Now a child, someone who's dull, would say, all the gold is gone. No, same amount of gold, but now it's been beaten flat, but it's the same gold. What point is he making about their love?
It's going to be the same regardless if they're together or
Right.
not.
Whether we're together or not, it's the same thing. It just looks different. Right? It looks completely different to somebody who's dull. In other words, somebody who doesn't get it. Somebody who's only in love with the body. We are different, he says. Our two souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, breaking, but an expansion like gold to airy thinness beat. In other words, you have a ball of gold, you heat it up, you can beat it flat, and it's a little thin, same amount of gold, right? If they be two, right, They are two so as stiff twin compasses are two. Now, here we go. Mathematics meets love. Did you ever, in your math class, have to make a circle with an instrument called a compass? Do you remember that? Do you remember how it worked? You had an instrument that looked kind of like this. Do you remember? It had two legs that separated, correct? Right? To make a circle with your compass, how does it work physically? How does it work? Well, you have to have one leg that stays in place, correct? The other leg has to do what? Go out and then go all the way around, correct? If this middle leg is moving all over the place, what kind of circle are you going to make? A pretty crummy one, right? The only way a good circle gets made is for this leg to stay in place. The only way to make a circle is for the other leg to separate or to go away. But because of the way that the compass is made, the two legs are attached, right? So in other words, if the two legs could have a personality, right? When somebody picked them up to make the circle, as they started to separate, the one leg that's going to stay in place might start shouting, no, 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 don't go away, I don't want you to go, right? The second leg would say back, no, no, you don't understand. That's in the nature of how you make a circle. You have to stay in one place. I have to go out, go on a little journey, but ultimately when the compass gets picked back up, the two legs come back together. Now, when I'm talking with freshmen in high school about this poem, and I start talking about legs separating and come back together, they immediately start going, because they think about sex. Dunn, of course, wants to play this game. And the minute that you start thinking, oh, that's a funny word picture, you're right, a compass is like a woman separating her legs for sex, immediately we're back to, yeah, you don't get it. That isn't love. That's called sex. That's not love. In other words, he's going to play double games with us all the way through this poem. Take a look at how the poem then ends up. And of course, it's a poem which when you finish reading it, you can't help but go, oh, that's pretty sweet. Take a look at what he says. If our two souls are two, they are two so as stiff twin compasses are two. Thy soul, the fixed foot, makes no show to move, but doth it the other do. And though it in the center sit, that's how you make a circle, right? Though it in the center sit, yet when the other far doth roam, it leans and hearkens after it, and grows erect as that comes home. Of course, the word erect is a sexual word. Dunn is playing an intentional game. If you are a reader that is focused predominantly in the physical box, you're going to read this poem in its sexual way. But if you are a reader of the more metaphysical orientation, you will see he's saying something profoundly important about true love. He's answering the question, how do you know if it's true love? And the answer is, you know it's true love when you can endure separation, and it's okay. Such wilt thou be to me, who must, like the other foot, obliquely run. To oblique means to make a circle. Thy firmness. Remember what we said? The only way you can make a really good circle is for that one centerpiece to stay in place. Thy firmness makes my circle just and makes me end where I've begun. Oh. In other words, we are truly in love. We don't just love bodies. We rather love minds. And minds can endure separation. Therefore, a valediction forbidding mourning. There's no reason to cry. There's no reason to be sad if you are away. Unless we're totally in love with just the body. But we're not totally in love with just the body. This will be Dunn's suggestion to his wife, that his and her love is something of the second box. Not physical, but what? What's at the top? Metaphysical. Now, this poem becomes very influential because notice that in the poem he uses concrete, very concrete examples, right? Moving of the earth, brings harms and fears. Very concrete examples. Notice the opening example of a man dying in his bed, right? These are all examples that would end up in the first box. But the whole point of the poem is to point out that love is something of the second box, metaphysical, right? Which obviously led one or two readers to ask the simple question, I thought I was in love, but am I really in love? Is it true love if I don't believe in that stuff of the second box? If all I believe in is the human body, then how can I really think about true love? That made a very interesting question in the Renaissance. Got me? All right, so there you go, some introductions to some of those poems. That at least gives you an idea of how we're